Hi, welcome. We're going to be looking at a sample summative assessment today for a summer's reading on Module F. This is the same sample summative assessment which we asked you to print out and grade at the beginning of this session. We're going to go over the grades that you gave as opposed to the grades that we gave and see if there are any questions or if we got it all right. So the first thing I want to go over is a review. We made some summative assessment changes, and in light of those changes, the summative assessment we've also changed as well. So the changes have to do with rubrics, question types, the number of questions, and point distribution. These are all things that you received in the session itself and that I'm not going to go over now. Just make sure that you're up to date with them. The rubrics, for example, which you are supposed to have in front of you and which you were supposed to have used in order to grade your summative assessment, can all be found in the handbook as well as on the site in session 9. The question types have remained the same. Each summative assessment should still contain lots questions, HOTS questions or interpretation, and a bridging text and context question. The justification question, which you can find on some of the old Bagrut exams, has been replaced by what's called an extended HOTS question, which we learned about in a previous session. For the extended HOTS question, just as a review for you, students must choose the HOTS that they're going to use to answer the question and name it and write it on the line provided for them. Then they should answer their question showing appropriate evidence of the use of the proper thinking skill and the chosen one that they used. Students will no longer be able to ask to justify or explain why they chose that particular thinking skill. This chart is also in the session that you have. Pay attention just for a moment at the difference between the demands of Module F, which put more emphasis on the HOTS questions, as opposed to Module D, that puts more emphasis on lots questions and a more equal percentages. The bridging question for F is worth 20 points, whereas on D it's worth 15. Okay, we're going to assess the student's exam that you have already assessed and is sitting in front of you. We're going to go over the points that the markers gave. This is the way the exam should be marked. Compare and contrast the grades that you gave to the student to the grades that the Marvad gave to the student. So for the first question, when George went to the park, he wished for a better life. Give an example of something he wished for. The first answer is a girlfriend. The content is totally correct. The answer meets all the criteria. That is what you see on the rubric. Language is full points, total of 5 points for that question. The second student gave an answer, a job. Now, pay attention. The content, the answer is only partially correct. George did wish for a good job. And this difference is significant because he had a few jobs already. They weren't very good, and he wanted one that was going to make him a lot of money. So we took half points off for that answer for the content, and the language is fine for a total of 3 points out of 5 for that question. The second last question was, the result of George's leaving school at the age of 16 was, this is a multiple choice question, okay? It's either totally right or totally wrong, and the answer is 2. He spent most of his days doing nothing. And again, I repeat, multiple choice lots questions are either 0 if they're totally wrong or 5 if they're totally correct. The third question, why does George like Mr. Catanzara? Give one reason. The first answer was because from the time he was a boy, Mr. Catanzara was the only one who paid attention to him. And unfortunately, lots questions, I remind you, are what is explicitly told us in the story. This is not explicitly told us, so it gets no points. And therefore, language also gets no points because although the language is fine, once the content is wrong, we don't give language points. So this question got a total of 0 points. The second answer was because Mr. Catanzara gave him money to buy lemon ice when he was a boy. This answer meets all of the criteria. The language, we took off a half a point for the incorrect use of the present simple. Therefore, this answer received a total of 4.5 points. The fourth question, George spent most of his day alone in his room. What did he do there? So the first answer was he listened to the football game. Well, that's partially accurate. He actually listened to the baseball game, so this answer got 3 out of 4 points. The language got only half a point for, again, the incorrect use of the present simple, for a total of 3.5 points. The second answer was, he read a lot of books. So this answer is not right at all. He looked at picture magazines, he read the World Almanac, however, he did not read a lot of books. The language is fine, but they don't get points for language, so this answer received a total of 0 points. The first HOTS question, question 5, when George first meets Mr. Catanzara, he lies about reading the books. Why is Mr. Catanzara's respect so important? And remember to support your answer with information from the story. The first answer is because George thinks that Mr. C is smart, and if he will respect him, all the people Mr. C knows will respect him too. In this question, although the first part of the answer is correct, the second part is not. George does not think that Mr. C is smart, but he doesn't think that Mr. Catanzara's respect will bring him respect from others. There is no reference to the text. There's no support. We took off a half a point for incorrect use of language. This answer out of 10 received 5.5 points. In the second answer, because George thinks that Mr. Catanzara is smart, Mr. Catanzara reads the New York Times and asks George different questions. That answer is completely correct. It received full points. The language also received full points. This answer received a full 10 points. The next question, question 6, after Sophie realizes that George hasn't been reading the 100 books, she says, "Why should I break my back for you? Go on out and get you bum and get a job." Do you agree with Sophie's opinion of George? And then again, explain with reference to the text. So the first answer was, I agree, because we see in the story how all he does with his day is walk in the park, read magazines, or do nothing, making him a bum. Now, this answer is totally correct, and there is suitable reference from the text. All he does is walk in the park. The language is perfectly fine, and this answer received 10 points. In the answer 2, I agree because George is very lazy. So this content, the answer is actually correct. However, we're missing supporting details that show that he is very lazy. That lost 2 points. The language is perfectly fine, and this question received 8 out of 10 points. Question 7 says, go buy yourself a lemon ice, Georgie. Why did Mr. Catanzara say this to George? This is a 10-point question. The first answer was because he's drunk and he thinks George is a little boy again. So this is not correct at all. Although Mr. Catanzara is drunk, he knows that he is not talking to a little boy, and therefore the cause and effect here, or whatever it is, isn't correct. The language is not, we don't give any language points because the content was wrong, and so therefore this answer gets a total of 0 points. The second answer was, when George was a little boy, Mr. C gave him money to buy lemon ice. George lied to him about reading books, and Mr. Catanzara thinks he is acting like a little boy. So now this is a totally correct answer. It's not only correct, but it also has appropriate reference from the text and support. The language has a couple of present simple errors, several language errors. We took off 1 out of 2 points. This question received 9 out of 10 points. Now the extended HOTS question, which is the question that replaces the justification question, we learned about it in a previous session. Let's look and see how the application of it is. In question 8, it says, how does what we learn about George's family or his neighborhood help explain his situation at the beginning of the story? Now, this is a 15-point question. It's broken up into 2. One is the answer itself, which is worth 10 points, and the other is the HOTS component, which is worth 5. So this student explained cause and effect. The family is poor. His father, for example, accepted George's decision to leave school. This fact caused George to misunderstand the importance of education and also caused him to do nothing for improving his life. The content is basically correct. Okay, there's one thing wrong there, that we don't know that George's father accepted his decision to leave school. There is no basis for this in the text. We took off 1 point for that. And the language is pretty much okay. It's got 1 or 2 small errors. We took off a half a point for that. The use of the HOTS, which means that they named the HOTS and they used it in order to answer their question. The skill is appropriate and suits the question. And they show evidence in their vocabulary that is connected to the skill. Okay, and that gave them a full 5 out of 5 points. So out of 15 points, this answer received 13.5. The second answer, they used the thinking skill of inferring, and they wrote, we can infer that the people in the neighborhood are uneducated. George doesn't have any social pressure to get an education, and he quit school. That is a perfect answer. Okay, we know that the neighborhood is poor. We know that they sit outside when it's hot. We know lots of things that education seems to be important, but they don't have it. The language is correct, but now look at the hots. Although the hots is appropriate and has been used correctly, there is only partial evidence of its use. In order to get full points, we needed to say we can infer that the people in the neighborhood are uneducated because they have low-paying jobs. We can't infer from nothing. We need to infer from something. This answer received 13 out of 15 points. Notice the answer is correct and the hots received only partial credit. That can happen a lot. Question 9. How do you think Mr. Catanzara sees George? And then again, support your answer with information from the text. This first student used the thinking skill of inferring. I think Mr. Catanzara sees George as someone who reminds him of himself. I infer this from Mr. C's words, don't do what I did, which means that once Mr. Catanzara was in the same situation as George and doesn't want him to repeat his mistakes. Perfect answer. That has accurate supporting details. That has the right answer. There are no language mistakes. And the use of hots, the skill is appropriate. And when they inferred, they wrote, I inferred from his words. And that makes it a complete inferring answer. This answer received full credit for 15 points. The next one was the thinking skill of distinguishing different perspectives. And they wrote, Mr. Catanzara sees George like he sees his own life and don't want that George end like him. The content of the answer is pretty much correct, but there are no supporting details, so they received a 6 out of 8 for that part of it. The language has a couple of mistakes. We took off a point for that. And the hots is totally wrong. They chose the hots of different perspectives, but there is only one perspective here. It's the perspective of Mr. C. Therefore, this was a bad choice in hots, and they got 0 points for that. This answer received a total of 7 points out of 15 for the entire question. The last type of question that we have on the exam is called the bridging text and context question. And it's making a connection between the new information and the text. So this first one from Summer's reading is many first-generation Americans, like Bernard Malamud, valued education as a path to opportunity for themselves and their children. Make a connection. The first answer you've already read and graded, and I'll go over just a couple of things, is a story about the life of immigrants and difficulties they faced. As an immigrant himself, Bernard Malamud faced challenges. At this point, the quote comes to fruition. Pay attention. This bridging text sounds really good and really professional, but it's not a bridging text. There is no connection explicitly stated. There are no details from the story to support their answer. The only thing that's correct is the information about Malamud, and this received half points. The vocabulary is very high, and the student wrote something that sounded very good. This was actually taken from a bagrut. However, it was not a correct bridging text. Bridging text and context questions require an explicitly stated connection. There were very few language mistakes, and so they received full points for language. This answer received 12 out of 20 points. The second answer was about Malamud wrote a story about George, a young man who quit. Obviously, education is important. He lies to Mr. Catanzara about reading. Malamud wrote a summer's reading about the importance of books in education because he valued education as a path to success. This answer is well organized. The information is all relevant and accurate. They explicitly stated a connection in the last sentence, and there are supporting details. The language lost only 1 point for a few errors. This answer received 19 out of 20 points. Excellent, excellent answer. So let's just sum up for a minute. Please create your summative assessments carefully. Remember to include enough questions. Use old bagrut questions. If you're using a justification, you can just change the instruction to be an extended HOTS. Old bagruts are available on the TLC site. Rubrics are just a necessity. You have them in front of you now. You should have them in front of you whenever assessing student answers. And instead of editing all of the grammar and spelling mistakes, Better to give guiding comments to help them to learn how to answer the questions better in the future. And I'd like to wish you and your students a lot of good luck in testing the literature program.